Good morning, Sunday morning. I'm in a bit of a different place today. I'm actually up in Ohio visiting family, and we're getting ready to leave back down south, Thanksgiving and all that. So probably don't have a whole lot of time today, but I still want to keep up with my weekly videos. So I think what would be a good thing to talk about today is remembering where you came from. And that's kind of an important lesson that we should all learn throughout our lives, because the people who forget where they came from kind of lose sight of themselves and who they are. And you kind of hear those stories of, some guy grows up in a small town, plays a little guitar, becomes famous, forgets where he comes from, and, dies with a bottle of pills and whiskey next to his pillow, right? There's songs about that even. And it feels kind of appropriate to talk about that. This deck that I happen to be sitting on was my very first project, actually. So it's kind of cool to come full circle. See, when my grandfather was alive, and I remember this about, it was over 20 years ago now, and the deck that was back here was rotting out, and it was just done for, and he had just recently retired about that time, so he had time to kill and he had money to burn, so he built this whole deck. And I was about 8 years old at the time, and of course I wanted to help, drive the nails and all that. And unsurprisingly, I busted my thumb open with the hammer, and that was the very first time I'd ever done that, was at the age of 8, and the rest, they say, is history. But it's important to remember where you came from and where you first started out, because then you can see what kind of progress you're making in your life. You cannot lose sight of the past, because you kind of use that as the foundation for your future. There are people who may be recovering addicts who say, man, 2 years ago on this day I was drunk in the gutter, but look at me now. There are so many examples you could think of where remembering where you came from is just an important thing to do. It's the foundation upon which you build your future, and it's a big part in developing your personality, who you become. We are all a product of our environment to some shape or another, and it shapes how we grow and how we change. And it's also important to know that you also have the power to bloom even in the worst of soil. So, some of us maybe came out of rough homes or had family problems, drug problems, but there are those of us who made a choice, and we said, you know what, I can choose to be better, or I can choose to continue groveling in my vices. So it's just really important to remember that. Then I think it's also important to just remember, and it's good to go back to old places. Like, again, this was my first project, and I'm 31 years old now, so it's crazy to think of all the stuff that I've done over the years and all the things I've built and worked on, and here I am sitting on the very first thing I ever worked on. And I think then maybe this isn't the most philosophical or meaningful of Sunday videos, but I'm just happy to be able to take a moment to just sit and think about days gone by. I was very fortunate. I got to spend a lot of time with my grandfather before he passed away, and he was a huge influence on who I came to be. I mean, the race car, that's literally something I built for him. And I guess if I can give you any advice this week, is if you're fortunate enough to have parents or grandparents, spend time with them, make the time happen. I've heard people make excuses. Oh, I'd love to go visit Grandma Ethel, but I just don't have the time. Well, yes, you do. Make the time. I drove 12 hours to get here, and I don't regret it. My grandmother, she just turned 89. By the grace of God, she's still doing good. But I set aside everything. I made a 12-hour trip up here so I could spend Thanksgiving with her, because that's what you should do. To the best of your ability, if you're fortunate enough to have those kinds of people in your life, you make the time. You make it a priority. You plan for it. I know when my wife was here with us last week, she talked about one of the things you really need to do to distress yourself is to plan. Planning is kind of everything. Is if you've got an aging family member, you need to plan around them. And it might seem like a hassle. Yes, it's loading up the wife and the kid and the dog and driving up the highway for 12 hours in Thanksgiving traffic. It sucks, but it's worth it. Make the time. And that does kind of tie into remember your roots, as my grandmother is my roots, and I'm lucky enough that she's still living, so I'd rather remember her while she's alive than be thinking about her when she's dead. I cannot stress that enough. If you're fortunate enough to have someone in your life, an aging family member that's still around, make the time for them, because I promise you, you will not regret it. And I'm sorry, I know this was a bit of a rushed video this week. It's a holiday weekend, and I'm about to make another 12-hour trip back to South Carolina. And maybe I have a little bit more time to prepare for something, prepare something better for next week. But I just appreciate y'all hanging out, and I hope y'all had a good Thanksgiving. And hopefully Christmas turns out to be well for y'all as well. So stay in touch, leave a comment, and until we meet again, stay gold.